Adam has one.
Good evening. Good evening. I look out here and I'm overwhelmed by the support of our membership for this event. Thank you very much for coming.
Hey, Charles.
Yes, sir.
Speak up. Speak, can't hear you.
Try again.
Test, test.
I turned off the echo.
Is it working now? Can you hear me, Fred? Good evening, and thank you for coming this evening. It's wonderful to see so many club members out here to join us tonight. Number one, the Board of Directors would like to recognize Stan Grossman for being an original member of our club. He's the last original member who remains a member here. So thank you, Stan. Over the past 10 years, I've had the privilege of golfing with Stan multiple times. And every time I go around the course with Stan, I hear new stories about the history of Forest Hills, the history of golf, and I learn new rules that I have been ignoring. So we really appreciate Stan coming out this evening to share some of those stories with us. Tony Piazza has graciously agreed to MC the event and moderate questions for us. I hope everybody has a good time. Thank you for coming. And Tony, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Charles. First, I want to thank all of you for coming this evening. I think this is a special occasion. I'm glad to see you all participating. It's hard to believe that this club is celebrating its 60th year. Most of us, except for one, were here to experience that. So just to give you an idea, 60 years ago, Lindbergh Boulevard was the way west major highway. That was it. And Clarkson Valley, most of Clarkson Valley, that we go up today, was owned by the Barnes family. And the Barnes family wanted to do something with this property. They wanted to build homes, but they tried to figure out who's going to come all the way out from town to be here. So they decided to build a golf course. And that's how the whole thing started. They needed a golf pro. So they went around and they were looking for someone. And there was a gentleman by the name of Dutch Harrison. Now, Dutch had pretty much retired from from his activity on the tour and had taken the position of head pro at Old Warson Country Club when it opened up. He was there for several years. And then he was offered the position of pro at Olympic Club Lakeside, Olympic Club in San Francisco. He went out there. And then when the Barnes family decided to develop this property, they needed a pro, and they went to Dutch. And they induced him to come back here. What they didn't know was that Dutch was so tired of being cold in San Francisco that he would have gone anywhere to get out of there. The first tournament that was played on this golf course was played on what was then called the green course. We call it the Valley Course today. That was the first course that was open before the championship course started. How many of you here ever got to meet Dutch Harrison? Good. Okay. Just to give you an idea, you see his name around here, but a lot of us don't know what Dutch was all about. From the 40s to the 60s, Dutch was one of the major characters on the tour. He qualified to play in 23 U.S. Opens. he was in 19, I can't remember the time, when the Open was held at Cherry Hills. We've already heard a story about Arnold Palmer on the last day, deciding he was going to drive the first hole, and everyone thought he was crazy. He did it and won the tournament. Dutch came in third in that tournament. Dutch was 60 years old when he played in his last U.S. Open. He was on the Ryder Cup. He was nominated to the Ryder Cup for 4 years. He actually played in two of the four. It wasn't a big deal then. They didn't want to cost too much money to go to England. Before the USGA started their U.S. Senior Open, there was a tournament called the U.S. Senior Open. It was not affiliated with USGA. Dutch played in it 6 times, won it 5 times. Stan comes into the picture. Dutch Harrison is Forest Hills, Stan's a member. Stan told me that he played pro ball for 4 years with New York Giants organization. He quit playing pro ball. He had a younger brother. Younger brother's name was David. David told him, he says, one day he says, Stan, I'm going to go out and play some golf. You ought to come with me. And Stan says, play golf? Only sissies play golf. So anyway, his brother says, well, it doesn't make any difference because you could hit the damn ball anyway. Well, that guy's his anger up a little bit, so off he goes. Little did he know that challenge resulted in him pretty much devoting his whole life to the enjoyment and propagation of the game of golf. The competitive golf in St. Louis back then was limited to the St. Louis District Golf Association. It was a group of private clubs that conducted tournaments for competitive players. Stan represented Forest Hills for 34 years with the St. Louis District Golf Association. In 1992, Stan, Tom O'Toole, and Jim Holtby and several other people decided they wanted to start a program for competitive golfers who did not belong to private clubs. And that was the start of the Metropolitan Golf Association. Stan was one of the founding members of that, and he served, get this straight, he was the president of the Metropolitan Golf Association for 24 years. On a national level, Stan was asked to become a USGA committeeman. The USGA committeeman is basically a volunteer organization that devotes their time and travel to attending USGA events and helping administer them. He became a committeeman for the USGA Junior Amateur Committee, which oversees all the boys' junior competitive events. And he started that in 1982, and he retired from that position in 2007. In 1996, they asked him to join the Rules Committee. That's the group that volunteers to go to all the events, to be the walking rules officials and administer the fields. And Stan did that for the U.S. Open and for the U.S. Senior Open. He did that for 11 years. He got to meet some great people, both on the junior amateur level and on the professional level. You might want to ask him about that. In 2012, Stan was honored as the recipient of the Joe Guy Award. Joe Guy was the executive director of the USGA from 1934 until 1969. That award was set up in his name to honor individuals for meritorious service to the game of golf as volunteers. And Stan received that award in 2012. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Stan. Stan's not going to give a speech. He just wants to be able to answer any questions that you might have about him. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Tony, and appreciate all you people coming to this thing. When I was first asked to do this, I said, I'm not interested in this kind of thing. But anyway, thank you all, and thank you all for being here. I've been a very lucky person, to be very honest with you. And I got involved with Forest Hills because I went to high school with a young man by the name of Chucky DeWitt, who was Bill DeWitt's son. And Bill DeWitt Sr. and Charles DeWitt owned the St. Louis Browns. And I wound up catching batting practice for the St. Louis Browns when I was in high school, and the Cardinals found out about that. And I wound up catching batting practice for both the Browns and the Cardinals at the old Sportsman's Park. And I'll never forget sitting in the third base dugout in those days. And the old ballpark in St. Louis, the visiting team had to come through the third base dugout to get over to the first base dugout. And the Yankees were in town. And I'm sitting there with my Brownie uniform on, waiting for players to come. And who comes walking through 3 feet from me is Joe DiMaggio. It was like looking at God. But I've been very, very fortunate. And how I got involved with the USJ was in 1981 on New Year's Day, and I'm watching the college football games. The phone rang about 4 o'clock, and it said, I'm looking for Stan Grossman. I said, you're talking to him. So Mr. Grossman, just want to say congratulations. It just came across the wire from New York that you were appointed to the USJ. That's how I found out about that. But to get back to Forest Hills, originally it cost, initiation fee was $400, and the dues were $20 a month. It's almost impossible to imagine that today, But Dutch Harrison was a wonderful, wonderful man, and good-hearted as anybody could ever be. But in those days, the tour was completely different than what we all know it today. They weren't playing for tournaments and winning $200, $300, $400, $1 million. If they won a tournament in those days, they were winning $500 or $600. And one time, years later, sitting down in the pro shop with Dutch, I happened to say, Dutch, could you have won any more tournaments? He said, oh yeah, Mr. Grossman, I could have won a lot more. Yeah. So, what goes through your mind is that he three-putted the green or hit a ball in the water or something. He said, Mr. Grossman, you don't understand. He said, Dutch, I won't understand something unless you tell me. He said, Mr. Grossman, back in those days, if you won a PGA Tour event, you won $300 or $400. And he said, if I was in contention, we had a bookie that traveled with the tour, I could win more money betting on the other guy than and that's what went on in those days. And young people like Johnny DeLuca here would never believe things like that. But Dutch was really a wonderful, wonderful man. Was married 3 times. I only knew the last 2. And both of those were really nice women. And the last lady that he was married to, her name was Shirley Harrison. He met her on an airplane. She was originally from Philadelphia, from Pittsburgh. And Dutch had the makeup of him was somebody could be sitting next to him as a complete stranger. He would start a little talk. And to make a long story short, he wound up getting married a couple months later. and talking about that, after Dutch passed away, Shirley moved back to Philadelphia, where she's originally from. And about about 10 years ago, I get a package in the mail. A little package about so big. And I opened it up, and you wouldn't believe what was on the inside. But I opened the box up, and it's a solid gold, 14 karat gold watch with a note that said, "I know that Dutch would want you to have this." I will guarantee you one thing, I would bet all the money that I have that he didn't buy it. But, and a lot of people don't really know, but Sam Steed also played on this golf course. Doug said to me one day, the Open was coming to Belle Reve, and he said, "Mr. Grossman, what are you doing tomorrow?" I said, "Dutch, I'm going to work. What do you think I'm doing?" He said, "Why don't you come back here at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon?" I said, "For what, Dutch?" He said, "Mr. Sam's coming over." I said, "Dutch, who is Mr. Sam?" "Steve, who do you think I'm talking about?" Anyway, Sam Steed and Billy Casper played down the first hole and walked over to ninth and played up to the ninth green. That was during the 1965 U.S. Open at Belle Reve. But he was a wonderful man. I can remember all of a sudden these stories are coming to my mind. I happened to walk through the pro shop after playing one day, and he said, "Mr. Grossman, where are you going?" I said, "I'm going upstairs to have something to eat, Dutch." He said, "Why don't you come back down here about 4 o'clock? I said, "For what?" He said, "Mr. Bob's coming over for a lesson." Again, I had to say, "Dutch, who is Mr. Bob?" "Colby, who do you think I'm talking about?" Yeah. Bob Colby lived in Belleville, Illinois, and it was the top of his career at that point. And at 4 o'clock, here comes Bob Colby in a brand new Pontiac, and opened up the trunk, and one of these big Spalding bags comes out, if you remember all of those. And in those days, the practice range was across the road where the tennis courts are today. And so we get a bushel basket of balls, and the three of us go over there. And it's about 3:30 in the afternoon, nobody around. Dutch throws some balls on the ground and said, "Mr. Bob, let me see hit this 8-iron. Takes the 8-iron, hits about 160 yards in those days, way up in the air with about a 3-yard draw. Said, "Bob, let me see you hit another one." It's a tracer. Said, "Bob, don't change a thing. Everything looks perfect." And Colby said, "Are you sure, Doug?" I said, "I'm sure. Don't change a thing." Okay, put the club back in the bag, rode back to the turnaround down here, put the clubs in the car, and said, "Dutch, do I owe you anything?" He said, "No, get out of here, glad to help." And Bob left. And I'm thinking, what did I just see? 45 miles to Belleville. Here, he just drove 90 miles and hit 2 golf balls. And 2 years ago, I don't know if many people in this particular room know that the 17th hole at Old Warson was remodeled by Ty Golby, who was Bob's son, who was a golf course architect, along with Roger Null, who was the so-called dean of the in this particular area of the ground superintendents and so forth. And so anyway, he said, "Coming over, we want to show you the new 17th green at Old Warson." So I drove over there, and they took me up, drove out there. It's a beautiful hole today compared to what it was in the past. Anyway, we're riding back, and I said, "Kai, did your dad ever tell you about the time umpteen years ago that he came over for a lesson from Dutch Harris?" He said, "Yeah, tell me, Mr. Grossman." So I told him the story, and he said, "My dad said it was 3 balls." But Forest Hills has come a long, long way as far as the playing ability of golf courses. The Little Nine has been remodeled a couple years ago with a friend of Tony's, who's a golf course architect. And if anybody's got any questions or about what happened in a long number of years, please holler. Oh, Tony said, reminded me to bring up, I played in the AT&T Bing Crosby at Pebble Beach twice with Dutch Harrison. And I think Dutch won the Crosby umpteen years ago, way back when. And Dutch and I went the first year, and then the second year, my wife went with us. And my wife, Barbara, could go to the movies 3 times a day, every day of the week. Loved the movies and loved the movie stars. And Dutch and I and Barbara were having breakfast one morning at the lodge, and who walks in but Dean Martin? And Dutch says, "Mr. Dean, how you doing?" You know, and they started up a conversation. To make a long story short, Dean sat down and had breakfast with us, and Barbara thought she was in heaven. So a lot of neat things have happened other than hitting a golf ball, you know. But on the other hand, it's all because of this particular game. And my son was on to pick me up, brought me out here today. Still remembers as a kid playing here. Oh, yes, and well, I think I mentioned how I was appointed to the USGA, and I was appointed to the junior committee, the boys junior committee. And after a couple of years, here comes this young kid, Tiger Woods. And to make a long story short, the first time he played was at Bay Hill, Arnold Palmer's golf course, and wound up winning the junior. And fortunately, it was also I refereed the final match, and got to know Tiger pretty well and his dad. And he also won a tournament up in the Boston area that I also officiated at. And this past June, the U.S. Open was being played at Pinehurst. And I'm having breakfast on a Wednesday morning about 10 o'clock at home, and my phone rang. And that was Tom O'Toole, who was a past president of the USGA. He said, "Rose," he said, "last night there was some kind of an awards dinner that the USGA had on, and Tiger was given some kind of an award. But as he was walking out, he said to Tom O'Toole, 'Mr. O'Toole, please tell Gross I said hello back in St. Louis.'" So that was pretty neat, you know. But again, I've been a very fortunate guy, and not only in the playing of the game, but way back when, helped me in business as well. I wound up with a number of lines to represent in Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska because of golf. Can I do something? Thought maybe we ran out of money or batteries. But anyway, when Charles first approached me about doing something like this, I said, "Charles, I'm not interested in doing things like that." And then Tony called me and said, "Gross, you got to do it." And anyway, thanks Charles for arranging this. And this is kind of a special place to have been here so long. And I'll tell you another little story. When I was given the Joe Dye Award, Monica Sorenstab, same night, was given the Bob Jones Award in Houston, Texas. And she, if everybody knows, won a bunch of tournaments right here on this golf course. But in her speech, there aren't many very young people here except in Duluth, but in her speech that night, she talked about when she was a kid growing up in Sweden, that they belonged to a club, and her dad took her to the club one day, and she and her friends were playing, and all of a sudden it started to drizzle and rain. And she called her dad to come pick her up because it's raining. And she said, 20 minutes later, her dad picked her up at the airport, at the golf course, and we were pulled out of the club. She could still see some kids out there playing, and my dad said to me, "Monica, you want to say you're going to be a good player?" I said, "Yeah, Dad, I want to be a good player." And he said, "Well, a little rain doesn't bother those other kids. she said I learned a lesson right then and there. And as well, everybody in the room knows, she's turned out to be one of the all-time greats. Anyway, anybody have any questions? Yes?
Dan, what's your most memorable, crazy, whatever was ruling that you ever had to get while you're out on the course?
I had one with a player one time. I won't tell you the player's name, that's not necessary. But back and forth, argued back and forth. And I finally said, "You hit it here, I did." And walked away.
Mr. Grossman, do you have a favorite round of golf that sticks out?
Well, I would have to say that it wasn't memorable because I won it, but in 1965, I went to play in the British Amateur in Harlake, England, where the British Open was played last year. And I qualified and I played my first match against a British Walker Cup player who was a much better player than I was. But they assigned me a caddy who showed up with a suit and a vest and a tie on. I'd never ever seen anything like that. Anyway, I can remember coming to the seventh hole at Harlake, which is a straightaway par 5, and I hit a ball, T-ball, and it was about 2-3 yards in the rough, but just sitting up like this on the grass. And I said, "Frank, how far is it?" He said, 230 yards. So I go to reach and take my 3-wood out of my bag, and he goes, "No, that's too much." I said, "What do you want me to hit, Frank?" He said, "Just hit a 6-iron. I said, "Frank, I can't hit a 6-iron 230 yards. And he said, "Just get it going." So I hit the 6-wood. I hit the 6-iron, and God knows I must have rolled 100 yards up on that green. It's a different game over there. And anyway, a day or two later, the R&A arranged for me and my wife to drive to St. Andrews. So we get in a rental car, and it's a 6-hour ride from Liverpool up to St. Andrews. And here I am, first time ever driving over there on the wrong side of the road. And I got lost in Edinburgh. And driving around, all of a sudden I saw a police car. And so I stopped him back and got out of the car, knocked on his door. He opened the door, and I said, "Pardon me, sir." And he immediately said, "How can I help you, Yank?" I said 3 or 4 words. He knew that I was from America. And I said, "I'm lost on the way to St. Andrews. Could you please help me?" And he said, "Yeah, just go up 2 blocks and make a right-hand turn." And I did. And I said, "Thank you very much." And you won't believe what he said. He said, "Glad to help you, Yank, and God bless you for helping us out during the war." That doesn't happen in every country. And so I've been a very fortunate guy to not only hit a good shot once in a while, but having some other nice things happen.
Mr. Gross, we've also been very blessed, two of us, and I will just say thank you.
You know, I didn't know that you were coming, but that's Mr. Toulouche and his son Joey, who was originally a member here and wound up winning the state high school championship. So, Joey, you want to say something, maybe?
I'd love to hear the story about you at Chambers Bay when we saw you on the Fox broadcast with Jordan Spieth. You could talk a little bit about that.
What was the situation again?
When you were the rules official for Spieth at the Chambers Bay U.S. Open.
When you were walking with Tommy and what's his name, and you stopped. They went up the hill and you stopped on Saturday at the Open in 2015, Chambers Bay.
When you were the honorary rules official.
It was you, Mike Davis, and O'Toole walking together.
Oh, yeah, we were,
Turn it off again?
it's just better. We were walking with Jordan Spieth, who I walked with him when he won the U.S. Junior, and I also walked with him in the final round of the U.S. Open at Chambers Bay out in not California, but
Yeah, and you remember who he was paired with?
he was on.
And you remember who he was paired with? Hoping that the guy didn't hit any good shots that day.
Who was it?
Jump to live, what's his name, the cheater?
Dustin Johnson? TJ.
No,
Patrick Reed.
Patrick Reed.
Yeah.
He was playing with Patrick Reed.
Oh, Patrick Reed that's another story.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
I will tell you that most of the tour players are really nice. And getting back to that, most of the players are really decent guys. Arnold Palmer was a real gentleman, to be very honest with you. I can remember being in the men's locker room one time at one of the opens with Arnold and talking with a couple of other guys. And one of the other tour players came walking in with his hat on. And Warney saw him 15, 20 feet away and said, "Hey, Billy." Billy turns, "Well, sorry, Arnold." Yeah. And Jack Nicklaus, as you know, is redesigning the Normandy golf course for us. We've cut down over 1,000 trees already.
Wow.
And I would say, from what I know at this point, anywhere from a year and a half to 2 years, in Normandy will be back open as a public golf course, and to not only golf-wise, to hopefully improve that whole area of where Normandy is located. So it's not always just about hitting the ball or making a putt. I've been very fortunate to be involved with a lot of other things. Talking about Tiger for a minute, Tiger was a pretty nice kid, and he had a few problems after that, but his dad was a little on the militant side. But anyway, Tiger was unbelievable talent, that's for sure. As a young kid.
U.S. Open with Stadler and Kite.
What?
Greg Stadler and Tom Kite, U.S. Open.
I don't remember that, Doc. You want to come up
The story about when you were the rules official for them and the greens were shaved.
They shaved the greens?
They
Oh,
hit it up.
yeah. I don't know which one said it, but he three-putted the green and went over to his caddy and said, "They shaved the goddamn greens here, they shaved the greens in here, they shaved the greens in." Because the greens at the Open are quicker than any that they play all year long. And Charles?
Stan, one of my favorite stories you have is about caddying for Dutch. With how many golf balls did he use?
2, I have 2. That was for 36 holes. 2.
Dutch lived over the Four Seasons golf course. I don't know if you know where that's at, back at Dearborn, so on and he lived on the first hole. And he and his wife invited Barbara and I don't know if the kids are with us, but one Sunday, late in the day, to come over for barbecue. And we didn't live too far away, so we went. And all of a sudden, here comes a ball right in Dutch's backyard. And here comes some lady, and she says, "I think that's my ball, sir." And he said, "Let me have one of your clubs." And she, "What do you want? One of my clubs?" I said, "Just give me one of your clubs." So she hands him a pitcher wedge or 8-iron or whatever it was, and Dutch hits the ball right on the first green. And she said, "You must be a pro." A lot of things I don't really remember all these days, but Dutch was really quite a character. And a called me one day and said, Mr. Grossman, I have to qualify tomorrow for the US Open over at Westwood. Would you caddy for me? And I said, okay, Dutch. So I didn't live too far from him, and I picked him up 7 o'clock in the morning, and he comes out with a bag of about yay big around with a club stuffed in there, in his shoes and a dozen balls. I said, Dutch, what's with that bag? He said, well, Mr. Grossman, you're a businessman. I don't want you to carry one of those big bags. I said, well, Dutch, that thing, you can't hardly get the clubs in and out. So we go over to the parking lot at Westwood, open the trunk up, puts his shoes on, opens his dozen golf balls, Titleist, takes one sleeve out and slams the trunk. He said, Dutch, hold on a minute, we gotta play 36. Looks at me and said, I only need one in the morning and one in the afternoon. So here we go around. He shoots 69 in the first round. And his second wife, Thelma, at that time, brought us out a couple chicken sandwiches to eat. We sat down on the lawn and had them. As we were walking for the afternoon round, he said, Mr. Gross, give me one of those other balls. So I gave him another ball. And he shoots, I don't know, 71. We win the medal, and he's going to the Open. And we're walking back to the parking lot, and he says, I'm ahead of him a couple says, Mr. Gross, yeah. He throws me the ball. He says, take those balls home to Tommy. It's my son right here.
They look like they'd never been touched.
Right. But would any of us go to play 36 holes with 3 balls and only use 2? So anyway, I've had a lot of nice things happen to me through the game of golf. And I've had the right family at the same time. And a bunch of grandkids today. And there's a young man that's sitting in this room right now whose name is John Stanford DeLuca. And Johnny is rated the number 2 player in Kansas City, even though he doesn't live there. His dad grew up not too far from me, maybe about 100 yards. And when he was a young man, Johnny's age or younger, would always come down and help me trim the grass and cut the grass and chip balls in the backyard. And Big John's grandma and grandma were both from Italy. And John one time, back of some bushes, gets stung by a bee and went running home. And 30 minutes later, his grandma comes down and chewing me out in Italian. So a lot of things have happened because of this particular game. Anyway, thank you all. Charles, thanks for having me. I really didn't want to do this at the beginning, but it was awful nice of you to arrange this, and thank you all for coming.
I should have forgot to mention who was there, a man from Scotland right here.
I saw Dr. Johnson, but be sure to tell you the voice. Try to be here.
Well, you please tell him I said hello.
I will.
What a great guy.